some superhero, some fairy tale bliss, just something I can turn to, somebody I can kiss. I want something just like this. Oh, I want something just like this.
Well, good evening. I think I'm live at the moment. I would actually much prefer to come and sit down there with you and have a conversation than stand here at the lectern, but we've come up with this ingenious idea of live streaming. So now I feel like I'm at a podium doing an interview or something like that with this live streaming technology. So it'll be interesting to see how many people are online. We can actually track that watching tonight's information night about the QCAA 2020. But what I will say is this: it's not a speech tonight. This is a conversation. As parents, your sons are going to experience the biggest change in education for a very, very long time in Queensland. And I just want to, I suppose tonight was about reassuring you that we do know what we're doing, that the government seems to know what it's doing, and so we'll just provide you with a fair bit of information. I've given you a handout. Hopefully you've all got a copy of that. I'm going to talk about the components of that handout tonight. So you don't have to read it now, but we'll just sort of work our way through. I also welcome those who are online to this evening. We may have some questions later on, and what I'll probably need to do is repeat the questions for those who are online. So feel free to ask them at a later stage. So 40 years in the making. I thought I'd just play around with that just a little bit, just to loosen up a bit tonight, considering 40 years. 40 years, I'll just clarify, curriculum's changed obviously, but the senior assessment structure that you know as OP hasn't really changed much in the 40. Let's have just a quick look at a classroom from 1977. I challenge you to go back to 1977 and think where you were and what you were doing at this point in time. Unfortunately, I could only find an English classroom. We'll have a bit of a look at a couple of snippets here.
Right, we're all here now. Come on. Sit down. Oi! Now, come on. Now, we want none of that. None of that needling or swearing. It's not necessary. Come on, I don't want any more eating sweets in here. Finish the sweets. What, we short of chairs? Well, now we're going to sort out. Well,
don't sit there. I always sit there.
Right. Victor. It's on page 37 to 38, if you remember, about Germany. Now, briefly, we're not going to go into this in detail, but briefly, Germany is split up into a number of different principalities. 39 small states in Germany in, say, 1850. The largest state is Prussia. Now, Prussia, because of its geographic situation, if you think, we've got a map here. Look at the map on page 36. Now, you can see Prussia in the middle to the top right-hand section. See that, Prussia? The lines across it like that. And you see the other side of it, Russian Empire. Now, there is nothing between Russia and Prussia in terms of...
It's a bit random. I found it as a show about schooling in London in 1977. It's a little bit like a Four Corners episode. And they had these cameras that went in there, just having a look at the different classrooms. Apart from the fashion, I suppose what I'd be pointing out is a couple of things. The style of teaching up the front, him reading some notes. You notice how engaged the students were, or obviously clearly not engaged. I've made a couple of quick notes here. We didn't see any IT because there wasn't any IT. I was in grade 6 at Parade Preparatory College in Melbourne. I remember it well. You can do your calculations on my age. The behaviour, it was actually, I thought behaviour was worse back then than it is today in schools. Back then, I was the sort of the tail end of corporal punishment, and to be honest, in a lot of ways, corporal punishment, violence bred violence. In a lot of schools, it was sort of just, you kind of solve things by being taken down behind the, two boys go down behind the shed and beat the hell out of each other to get this thing sorted out. The ownership, who owned that class? Who was sort of engaged and involved in the class? Clearly the teacher up the front was having a lovely time talking about Prussia. You can tell the rest weren't. And obviously something like inquiry-based learning, we'll have all these sorts of words used in education these days, but as an example, an inquiry-based learning exercise where students may have their laptops be given some key terms, some targets to investigate, and really drive in 30 seconds what the teacher's probably delivered in an hour's worth of lesson there in this process from 1977. Let me give you even slightly more exaggerated example of change. Not quite 40 years, but you get the idea.
But Holland comes in for a pit stop. Time to refuel and change tires. Lou Moore himself changes the tires. Only 4 crew members, including the driver, are allowed to work on the car. It's a tense time. Holland stays in his seat, anxious to get away. Let's watch. Tires are changed at last. A crewman polishes the windshield as Holland moves away just 67 seconds after he stopped.
You get some idea of how things have changed in a short period of time, and the rapidity, the speed at which that change occurred in the 2013 Grand Prix in Melbourne. It feels a little bit like that in class at times with kids and their knowledge of IT, for example, and trying to keep up with the speed of change. So this is a bit of a context, if you like, as to why we need to change and why the state has chosen to make a change. It was essential. There was a process there that really needed to be looked at. They've done a great job. I'm not being paid by the Queensland Government, QCAA, but they've done a very good job in setting up a new structure, and I think you should have some confidence leading into it. So let's talk a little bit about the new structure, and what I thought I'd do is show you their version of the changes, and then we'll pick it apart. So we'll see how we go.
Queensland's system of senior assessment is changing. From 2020, Year 12 students' subject results will come from their achievement in 3 school-based assessments and 1 external assessment, set and marked by the QCAA, that will provide more information on student achievement. There will be new processes to strengthen the quality and comparability of the school-based assessments. The Queensland Tertiary Admission Centre, QCAA, will calculate tertiary entrance ranks by comparing student results across subjects. We'll be keeping some important features of our current system. Teachers will play a major role in developing assessments, making judgments about student achievement, and independently reviewing the work of their colleagues. Students will be assessed continuously using various assessment techniques that count towards their final subject result. From 2019, new syllabuses will define course content, inform teaching, specify standards, and outline assessment requirements. Teachers will be supported with professional resources such as marking guides, sample assessment instruments, and examples of student work. In line with syllabus requirements, schools will develop 3 assessment instruments for each senior subject. The quality and validity of these assessments will be verified by the QCAA through 2 new processes: endorsement and confirmation. Before school-based assessments can be used in classrooms, they will need to be endorsed by expert assessors who have been accredited by the QCAA. Schools will then teach and assess their students. QCAA will independently check and confirm a sample of assessments in every subject in every school towards the end of Year 12 to ensure the grades awarded by teachers are fair and accurate. Reviewers will receive specialist training to fine-tune their skills, and highly accomplished assessors will monitor their work. While schools are teaching and assessing, they'll also be preparing their students for the external assessment. External assessments will be developed by a team of discipline experts, including teachers and academics. Markers will be engaged by QCAA and will receive special training. They will be monitored and reviewed by senior markers and QCAA. External assessment will be common to all schools. Administered to schools at the same time, usually towards the end of a course of study, and marked by QCAA using a common marking scheme. After confirmation and external assessment marking have been completed, QCAA will determine each student's final subject result by adding the results from the school-based assessment and external assessment. The results on the external assessment won't be used to scale the school-based assessment results. Students will access their results from their online learning account. Subject results and other learning, such as vocational education and training qualifications, will be reported to students, with eligible students receiving a Queensland Certificate of Education. Subject results and other learning that can contribute towards tertiary entrance will be provided to QCAA so that it can be scaled to calculate new ranks called ATARs. The ATAR replaces the OP. These new processes are all part of QCAA's commitment to deliver a more valid and reliable system of senior assessment.
Okay. So this is where I'd like to just break it down a little bit for you. And I think the first thing that's pretty important is that you've heard of things like QTAC and QCAA and ATARs and so on tonight already. I've just given you some definitions here, or the clarification of the acronyms. ATAR, the Australian Tertiary Admissions Rank. We'll talk a little bit about further later on. Can you put your hand up if you know what an ATAR is? Excellent. Okay, so it's something that's very, very new to the room. What about OP, overall position? People, if I say OP, have you got some awareness of what OP is? A fair few nods there. Okay, the current situation is, and the easiest way to put it is that Lachlan Scully, who's doing Year 12 this year, is aiming for an OP score. OP1 is the best, OP25 is the worst, in terms of the overall result for Year 12 that is used by the tertiary institutions to get in. So they might have medicine, you need an OP1 at least, so you have to have an OP1 to get into medicine, or OP2 or something like that, into a particular university. Is that okay? So that's what's happening this year, next year, next couple of years, as the OP. What's going to happen is the ATAR will replace that, and slides later on will clarify what that means. It's a change in number, but it's also an Australian number. So it's interchangeable across states. New South Wales, Victoria allocate an ATAR, whereas OP is specific to Queensland. You notice where I say unit, I've put 4 boxes there. Unit 1, 2, 3 and 4. What we'll talk about at times is Year 11 and Year 12. And what I'll try to get you to do is just concentrate as best you can as Unit 1 being Semester 1, Year 11, Unit 2 being Semester 2, Year 11, Unit 3 being Semester 1, Year 12, Unit 4 being Semester 2, Year 12. Does that make sense? Those 4 blocks, if you like. It's pretty important to note that Unit 3 and 4 are attached, the boxes. You're not looking to have students come in and do Unit 3 biology and then change to Unit 4 general maths or something like that. You'd expect a sequence there. And you probably expect, okay, if a student wants to do chemistry, come into the start of Year 11, begin Unit 1, Year 11, work their way through into second semester in Unit 2, and then if they want to go on to Year 12 chemistry, off they go into Unit 3 and 4. Is that okay? So we hear about units, and I just want you to break them down into those semester blocks. And by the way, it's not all explained tonight. What I'm setting you up for is as you hear more and more in the next couple of years, you'll get really comfortable with this terminology, and that's my aim tonight, is really to get you to that point. QCAA, obviously we've mentioned a few times as the Queensland Curriculum and Assessment Authority, but QTAC is an interesting one. So QTAC is the Queensland Tertiary Admissions Centre. I'll explain this more later, but what I want you to pretty much lock away in your minds now is that at the end of Year 12, your son, if he's aiming for an ATAR score, your son will get results from QCAA on a sheet, numerical results against the subjects completed. That's like a report card from QCAA. They then go off to a completely different building in Brisbane called QTAC. QTAC work on behalf of the universities, crunch, and create a score called an ATAR. 2 very different groups producing 2 different results, sets of results if you like. So we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but I'd like you to just have that in your mind. So get to the end of Year 12, there's 1 set of results that come out, but they're crunched around to produce this overall number called an ATAR. We'll talk more about it later. Okay. So let's have a look at what your son's going to experience. There'll be new subject area syllabuses. Right now, if your son wanted to do Year 11 chemistry and Year 12 chemistry, the teachers are to go off, write up their courses that they want to complete. They get sent off to the QCAA for approval. They get approved, they come back and they deliver that course. No longer, your son will be following the same course that everyone across the state is following. The syllabus is submitted or given to the teachers, they must follow that. Why is it so important that there's a standardised syllabus for every student in the state? If there's going to be an external exam at the end of the year, your son will sit an external exam for every subject that he's studying. It has to be the same exam for everyone. And therefore the same course has to have been delivered to ensure that they're able to answer the questions in that same exam. New syllabuses for every subject, being developed. In Units 3 and 4, there are 4 assessment tasks that the students will need to complete. Now right now, and I'll talk more about advantages later, right now they complete a ridiculous number of assessment tasks. There will be 4 per subject. 3 of them will be internal assessment tasks. We'll get onto the details of how that works in a minute. 1 will be an external assessment task designed and marked by the QCAA. That one is what will appear more and more on the news, more and more in the media. We are moving from an entirely internally assessed structure in Year 12 to now all of a sudden every student is going to be sitting in a room at the same time, wherever they are around the state, at the same time sitting exactly the same paper at the end of the year as a part of their assessment now. This is the big change. The external task will contribute 25% for most subjects and will contribute 50% for maths and science subjects. So it's not that hard to work out. If they're doing English, 3 internal tasks will be 25% each, and the exam is 25%. Add it up together, get a result. Maths and science a bit different. The exam at the end of the year will be worth 50%, and the 3 tasks will have varying percentages, but they'll obviously add up to 50%, the other 50. How are we going? Everyone all right? Yeah. Excellent question. The exam will be at a common exam period at the end of the year, beginning at probably the Monday of the 4th week of term 4. If it follows the Victorian system, the first exam will be English, and every student in the state will be pretty much in a room. Not in English, no. In maths and science, yes. Yeah, so it's a full year. What I'll do, my last slide, is my experience. Most of you are aware that all of my teaching has been done in Victoria, and this system that they've moved towards has similarities to the Victorian system, and so I'll just provide you with some insights from my perspective on that. Excellent questions. And sorry to people at home, the questions were, will the exams be mid-year or end of year? And they will be end of year. And will it be assessing stuff from term 1? Well, the answer is in maths and science, yes. In English, probably mostly from unit 4 for the second semester. Okay, the QCAA syllabuses, the course content, if you like, the skills required, must define the course content and broken into the 4 units. They must inform teaching, and they have to outline the assessment items. There are 3 types of subjects that are going to exist, and they're pretty much 3 at the moment. But you don't care about the moment unless you've got an older son. It's in year 11 and 12. What will be is general subjects, which will be your run-of-the-mill standard subject for most students, if they're aiming for an ATAR score. So chemistry, English, maths, all of those standard subjects we're going to call them general subjects. You can have a quick read of the information. Don't worry too much if you get lost or whatever, but I'll let you read it. Hopefully that's enough time just to scan through it. I'm sorry, I'm going to go, yeah.
So, according to that, only their assessments and all their results in grade 12, so 3 and 4, they're the only ones that contribute to the score at the end?
100%. Yeah, so the question was, is it 3, 4 only that contributes to the ATAR, the assessment? And the answer is yes. And I'm sorry I'm going to talk about chemistry, but I've taught chemistry for 25 years. And in a different system, but I understand it, like I know it like the back of my hand. And so what will happen is the students, year 10 students, will do subject selections. Your sons, if you're in year 9, or there are others here I know who are in 7 and 8, but for the year 9s here, your son next year will choose subjects. And if he chooses chemistry, from the start of year 11 we'll begin unit 1. The course content is defined in a book that he will receive. So you can almost check it off and go, yes, I've done this now, I know what I've got to do. No doubt the textbook companies are well and truly onto this. They'll be providing texts associated with it. So you'll be working through units 1 and 2, and the assessment that occurs in units 1 and 2 will be defined by myself as a teacher. There won't be any checking from the QCAA to make sure I'm doing this or I'm doing that. It's school-based. And the word formative is one of the most important things in there, because the idea is it's designed to form the student, not to sum up their result. Formative versus summative. So you're there to provide them with feedback, how to improve. And most teachers will probably design the tasks without, because I'm live streaming, I can't lie tonight. But the simple fact is most teachers will align their tasks in Year 11 to something similar to Year 12, because the idea is to prepare them for the Year 12 tasks. So then they get into Unit 3. It'll be interesting when Unit 3 starts. I'll leave that hanging in the air. But you'd assume at the start of Year 12, wouldn't you, that they walk into their first class of Unit 3? Maybe not. We'll see how that all pans out in the next couple of years. But they walk into their class and they have 3 internal assessments that are going to need to be completed and 1 external assessment. And the teacher's clear in their mind about what they need to assess, how to get the best possible results from the boys in their class. Class time will be optimised. We really need to use as much class time as possible. But there's some great advantages in here. Now, that's the general subjects. Okay? There are 2 other types of subjects that your son might choose in Year 10 subject selections. In next year, might walk in and go, actually, I wouldn't mind doing an applied subject. The applied subjects are developmental 4-unit courses. They are what we call SASs at the moment, or authority-based subjects, is that right? Sorry, authority registered, I always get that wrong. Authority registered subjects. They will not contribute generally to an ATAR. Now I'll clarify that a little bit further later, because one can, but you wouldn't be having a student doing 4 applied subjects and aiming to get an ATAR, because they simply can't. So it'd be subjects that which will really improve skills, okay, rather than necessarily driving towards an academic result at the end of the year by doing a whole heap of applied subjects. And then, of course, there's the VET subjects which we'll continue to offer, and we think are very strong in this school. And VET sort of sits very much in the pathway of things such as trades, doesn't it? Students who want to move into that particular area. Once again, we'll see that VET can contribute to the ATAR later. But if your son is studying primarily VET, he will not qualify for an ATAR. Ultimately, the majority of what's required to get an ATAR score will be in the general subject area. Are you okay with those 3 subject categories now? Because you'll hear them at times. It's the general that you probably hang on to if your son is aiming for an ATAR. I'll clarify a little more later. Okay, the last page of your booklet that you've received, and sorry to those people online, you'll need to work off the screen in front of us. So this infographic is sort of the poster on everyone's wall. And it's very good. It really does explain it quite well. So I thought I'd just take you through it. We're going to go left to right, obviously. And we've already had a chat about the syllabus documents. These are documents produced by the QCAA and sent out to all schools. You organise the courses into 4 units, and then there's the 3 internal assessments and the 1 external assessment outlined in there. But then we need to clarify, well, if there are 3 internal assessments, what are they going to look like? And what does this mean? 75% of English will be decided by the teacher. So can the teacher just go, I really like, Tony, I'll just give her 100%. What does the actual mean in terms of really assessing carefully and fairly the course? Well, the school-based assessment you notice in the infographic there has endorsement and confirmation. And as the endorsement points out, and we're not going to go into too much more depth than this, that the teacher develops the assessments, they then send them off to the QCAA, and the QCAA endorses them. If the QCAA doesn't like it, it sends back that you actually haven't hit the mark here, teacher, you need to assess it and make sure you're addressing these criteria. Teacher redoes it, sends it back to the QCAA for endorsement until such a time as we can reach an assessment task which obviously needs to allow students to get 100%. You can't design an assessment task that's just not going to be able to allow students to get the best possible marks. So this is a pretty hot topic at the moment for teachers, that they're going to need to work on that. And what they're doing, QCAA are providing exemplars, assessment pieces, to workshops of teachers around the state. Our teachers are going off to these workshops and working on these exemplars about what a good task looks like, how you could best assess it, and so on. Just note, it then goes to confirmation. The student has actually completed the task now. And the QCAA sends to the school, I want to see student A, student F, and student X work. You need to scan it, upload it, we're checking it. If they deem, and it gets checked by two groups, if they deem that student F's results are incorrect, that they need to shift down or shift up, the teacher's missed the mark on it, the grades that student F has got, let's say they got a C and it needs to go to a B, then all the C's in the class will move to a B. Because effectively what they're saying is the teacher has missed the mark on this one, which means they've probably missed the mark on the rest of the C's. They've marked it too hard. Now it's just a little sample of what they're going to do in the confirmation. So this is again the case where I can't just say as a chemistry teacher, I really like this kid, I'm just going to give him the best possible mark. It goes off to confirmation, it could come back a couple of grades lower if I'm not on my game. Teachers obviously need to be trained in this area. Now, we'll say this. There's a bit of a correlation here to the current OP system. Teachers are used to sending stuff off to panels to be checked, to be bounced back, to say, no, actually you've got that wrong, the grade comes back. So it's not particularly overwhelming for teachers, but it's a bit different. Note the box down the bottom, the external assessment. Now, this is the big difference. This hasn't happened for a long time in Queensland. The Monday of the fourth week of term 4 in 2020, there'll be 31,000 students standing outside an exam room, probably at their own school or a major centre in Brisbane, wherever, standing there waiting to do an exam, English. And they'll be very nervous. I nearly said something else. Yes, they'll be very nervous standing out there. Interestingly, standing alongside them will be the teachers, and they'll be really nervous too. Because you stand there as a teacher going, oh, tell me, yeah, I'm sure I covered the course. I know I got it all. Yep, I've got it all covered. And then about half an hour into the exam, probably about a quarter of an hour reading time and then half an hour of writing time into the exam, the chief examiner comes over, opens the door and drops a paper outside the door. And the teacher grabs it and goes, what's in it? What's in it? Have I covered all of the course? Now, this is something that teachers in the state haven't experienced for 40 years. And it's a fascinating experience. It creates quite a lot of pressure on the teachers. There's obviously a lot of pressure on the students having to do an exam at the end of the year. But can you understand, if it's the same paper for everyone across the state, sat at the same time, you cannot manipulate that in any shape or form. As much as you dislike exams and whatever, as a standardised testing system, it can compare where people are at, as long as the teachers prepared the students well. And so you have this external assessment. The students will sit their English, then they'll probably move into maths. If it's something like the Victorian model, they do the largest exams first and they get smaller and smaller. Usually by the end of the third week, there's 3 students sitting a Croatian exam somewhere in the state. So it gets smaller and smaller as the time goes on. And the end of the 3 weeks, the students are done. This is all marked by teachers from around the state. They're all sent off and they mark sections and it all gets chewed away, and then the results come out after that. Just check my notes. That marking process produces ratification. Effectively, an analysis of data It's the combining of the internal and the external, having a bit of a check for anomalies. If a student got straight A pluses for their internal tasks and got an E for their exam, you probably understand there may be some questions asked there. There just doesn't seem to be that correlation there between the results, and that would be considered anomalous. Results are verified and the certification occurs, and it's really right at the end that that certification comes out. No idea on a date, but let's say 2020, if it was a Victorian model, it'd be about December 16 to December 17, somewhere around there, that the students sit at their computer and wait for 12:01 a.m. to get that result. Out it comes. Now, I don't know how the Queensland system's going to do it, but you have a sense that across the state there's communications going everywhere in the middle of the night about how people have gone with their results. How are we going? We okay? General idea of what's happening here? All right. So I just wanted to move to, I'll jump through a lot of that. Actually, I'll just quickly go back to that one. Yeah, and the definition of the actual assessment at Year 12 will be decided by the QCAA, but it'll be a broad stroke these are ongoing conversations with the QCAA to what extent they're going to define what those tasks will be. Year 11, or Units 1 and 2, internal, we just decided. Unit 3 and 4, Year 12, the guidelines are there. The marking schemes are there. Instrument-specific marking guides, you'll hear about ISMGs into the future, will be all provided. So I'll give you an example. If you know anything about chemistry, in chemistry you do this technique called volumetric analysis using the titration, the glassing, you do this sort of stuff. Well, there will be a titration. It'll be called an extended experimental investigation, and there'll be some form of titration in there. But obviously the teacher will decide what the titration is, whether it be testing for alcohol content in wines or sulfur dioxide content or sort of acid-based things, and they'll decide that and flesh out a lot of the rest around it, send that in for approval. So the topic will be there, the guide, if you like, will be there. It's a good question. Down the back. Oh, sorry, Sebastian, hang on a sec. Yeah, go on. Yeah, there's no checks and balances against is the course covered by the teacher. The reason the teacher's worrying is because you're human, and it's if you feel like you're sitting the exam yourself when it happens, it's just one of those things. And I taught chemistry for 25 years, and the night before the exam, I'd always sort of sit there going, yeah, it's fine, it'll be fine. But there's just a little bit of a human nature to it. So. The reality is the tasks will drive teachers through the course to some extent, the internal tasks. There will be professional groups working together. There's networking occurring already between different groups across the state. They'll be looking at different topics. The biggest issue for teachers, because they really need to complete the course now, the biggest issue for teachers is that by having a defined syllabus instead of developing a syllabus, is they'll be pushed into topics that they haven't done for a fair while. There was suddenly something on surface chemistry or whatever, and they'll go, I haven't done surface chemistry since I was at uni. So we're going to spend a fair bit of professional development time making sure teachers are up to speed in those areas. The checklist is effectively driven by us. The curriculum is dot points. You tick it off. You check it through. You make sure it's done. But you also do trial exams as a general rule. And if you've been through the New South Wales system, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Series of trial exams, and if every student after the third trial exam is getting 2%, you've got some serious flags going up. Sebastian, you had another question? As in the... Yeah, sure. So, yeah, good question. That's a really good question. Yeah, ironically, Sebastian, it's exactly the opposite of what you just said at the end. And I'm sorry about that. The maths is the perfect example where the course names will now be, they're called Maths A, B and C in Year 11 at the moment, in Year 12. They'll be called General Maths, Math Methods and Specialist Maths. And they are effectively scaled in terms of difficulty. So whilst we don't carry the names of Foundation, Core and Extension into year 11 and 12 because we don't define the course names, Maths is the perfect example where it is effectively categorised into groups. English is not, although, sorry, English has two categories, essential and general English. Yeah, so good question. Chemistry is just one course. Yeah, there aren't multiple courses for most areas unless they're histories. It might be a modern history versus an ancient history or something like that. But they're not necessarily ability based. Yeah. So the question is, are the boys going to be prepared to go into a Year 11 external course based on the fact that our 7 to 10 course is homegrown? Well, there's probably two comments. My first would be that this is exactly what we're doing with the staff now. So when there's a 3-week break in the middle of the year and the students go off for 3 weeks holidays, the first week, and a couple of days of that first week is us working as a staff to ensure that we're ready for exactly that sort of thing. I would also say we align to national curriculum, which is where the courses stem. They've aligned the QCAA courses from the national curriculum, and we're aligned to that as well. So it's not something we don't choose randomly, year 7 to 10, and just go, oh yeah, we might do this and get it all back to front, and it's quite progressive through. So. It is a really important 18 months for us as a school and has been really important 12 months leading up to this to make sure that the boys are going to be well and truly ready to step in there. Yeah. We've already got them. Yeah. Oh, not all of them. I think we've 46 studies of the general subjects and I think there's 40 ratified. Really interesting, 6 actually. I won't talk about them now, but chat later. It's quite interesting how it's ended up. They've thrown PE out and started again, just from feedback from teachers. So they've done a really good job with that. To be honest, I'm going to back them up. I don't have no reason to, but I think QCAA have done an outstanding job with this. Yeah. It's a very, very good question. Can you come back, if I don't answer your question when we're dealing with the ATAR, can you come back to me? All right, I think I'll answer it. So the question was, will there be bonus points like in the OP system attached to certain subjects that you get, can kind of jump up with bonus points because you're studying a language and so on. I'll get to that. And in fact, I'm getting to it now. Amazing. Just on ratification before I go to ATAR, what you'll see into the future, and these are really handy little things to hang on to as you try to learn more about this as it comes up. Each subject is going to be scored out of 100. And you might go, it's 100% for each subject. Well, it's actually out of 50 in Victoria for each subject. So at the end of the year, your son might have done English, math methods, chemistry, physics and music or something like that. And on the card, it will have English 73 and chemistry 92. So there's sort of there's a list of numbers. They'll actually also have a grade next to it, an A, B, C, D, E grade. But realistically, the numbers are going to be quite telling as we move on to the next slide. All right? Eligible students receive the Queensland Certificate of Education. You know, I was talking about units. If they do Unit 1, 2, 3 and 4 of English, then they get 4 credits for doing that. They have to get 20 credits to get their QCAA. So you can kind of start to add it up and go, right, this, this and this. But I'm going to stop right there because Paul Horan and I have been chatting today about this, and we actually are fairly convinced now, and I'm going to get in contact with QCAA. There are changes afoot, and we're not sure exactly what they are right now. So there's a current QCAA system with credits for completing units. We think it might be changing a little bit, but it'll be something similar. All right, so the ATAR calculation. You know how I just gave you a list, I said English and math methods and all that sort of stuff. The ATAR is calculated against the best 5 QCAA general subjects. Now right now, if you think about it and go, well, I wonder how many subjects my son will be studying in year 11 and 12. It's a good question. Because right now, Lachlan Scully is studying kind of, well, sort of 7, I suppose. It's, one of them's not quite, I'll better stop there just in case the teacher's nearby. But anyway, but if it's best 5, does that mean by studying 7 at the moment that the 2 are, is there any point in studying 2? Do you have an extra 1 to make sure you've got a banker? You know, just if you mess something up, there's a backup. Well, obviously we'll do quite a bit of work with you on that over the next 12 months really, to make sure that you fully understand the implications of the number of subjects that can be done, the number of subjects you might choose to do, and so on. And remember, if you take the English example, if you need 20 credits, you've got to have 5 kind of sequences, if you like, or at least, if you get the 4 credit points for doing Unit 1, 2, 3 and 4 English, then you've got to start adding it up to get the QCAA. So, there's a number of implications you understand. I'm going pretty early on this information night because I'd like you to start to think about it now, but in 12 months' time, or less than 12 months' time, we'll be talking subject selections, and we're having to get this right, this stuff. Now note, I've got an OR, and the rest of the page is the OR. You can get an ATAR calculated by the QTAC, remember, it's not by the same building, it's a different group of people. You can get an ATAR calculated by your best 4 QCAA general subjects, also, plus a QCAA applied subject, or a Cert 3 vet subject, or a Cert 4 vet subject, or a diploma or advanced diploma. So, what they have done is said you can include, remember I said there were 3 types of subjects, there's general, applied and vet. You can incorporate, if your son is wanting to do, wanting to be a tradie of some form, but wants to get an ATAR, keep the options open between engineering versus being a mechanic or something like that. So he's studying automotive down there as a vet subject, but also doing general subjects to ensure you can qualify. Well, that automotive could count if it's Cert 3. One of them can count. The other 4 have to be general subjects. You okay? I'm hoping I'm not losing you with this. So here it is. The ATAR cut-off scores used by tertiary institutions to gain access to courses. I just want to repeat. The QCAA have produced that report card that's got the 72 for English, the 92 for chemistry, 95, whatever it was for chemistry, and there's all those numbers down there with grades attached to them. They then punch them through to the database at QTAC, who now take over. They calculate it. They take the best 5 general subjects, or they take the best 4 general subjects plus a Cert 3 or whatever, and they calculate it. Now, if anyone ever finds out how the ATAR is calculated mathematically, and you understand that, please come and knock on my door and tell me about it. I've studied it, I don't get it. I kind of get the basics, but it's a very, very complex calculation. And I'm going to say It's not just complex because of the next dot point, it's just complex. It's the mathematics of it. It does involve scaling of scores. So here's the simplest way to put it. Based on a cohort that study a subject in a particular year and their results, the complexity of that subject, the difficulty of that subject will be ascertained by QCAA, and student scores will be adjusted accordingly. Now, I just made that definition up, so kind of right and kind of wrong, but it's pretty much right. So I'll tell you the way it works. If I use some examples in Victoria, generally with my chemistry, a study score of 80 would get converted to probably an 86 to 88 by QCAA. So they've got an 80 on their report card from the QCAA, but behind the scenes, QCAA have gone, actually that's an 86, because chemistry is a hard subject. PE generally didn't move. They got 80 for PE. QCAA says PE is a sort of middle of the road subject, we'll leave it at 80. They did language, specialist maths, no bonus points, scaled, okay, and shifted accordingly. And so immediately you say, oh, I need to know what these numbers are, so I'm going to get my son to do chemistry because it scales up 6 to 8, you know, and all this sort of stuff. There's no point in doing these other subjects. Well, the thing is, to get 80 in chemistry is a bit harder than getting 80 in biology. Sorry to say it, but it is. So biology doesn't shift up as much as chemistry. Let's use the example of foundation, math methods, and specialist maths. These are 3 different categories of mathematics that exist in the QCAA structure. In Victoria, what happened was the specialist maths goes through the roof. You get an 80 in specialist maths, you end up with a score of 95. What happened over time, students started to figure out that if I actually do foundation maths, I can get a 95 and it'll stay there, and it's a hell of a lot bloody easier than doing specialist maths. So they figured it out that in actual fact the bumping was no advantage whatsoever. Now I give you this little example because it actually nearly buried specialist maths in Victoria. They had to figure out that actually this was just way too hard, this subject, and they've changed it. But it's a classic case where all these students for a long time were choosing specialist. Great, I'm getting all this bump up. I want to be a doctor, so I'm going to get, you know, an increased result. Actually was penalising them in the end with their ATAR. So the message is this. You can't know the scale scores until the cohort have sat all of the tasks and the results go into ATAR. They will only work it out based on the results of that particular cohort. You can guesstimate based on, let's say, you know, in 2030 we look at the last 10 years' results and we see that it's scaled 5 up or, you know, whatever. You can guesstimate that that's going to happen. You just can't know for sure. You will hear Mr. Horan in the subject selections talk all about they've got to do what they like doing. Do not make the decisions on scaling. You're going to hear this over and over and over again because you're going to hear about scaling over and over and over again from the media. This is a hot topic. You know, this is not fair. Hang on, this subject gets bumped up, all this, you know, all that sort of stuff. It's been going on since Adam was a boy in other states. It effectively works, and I just don't think you need to lose too much sleep about it. But you just have to keep focusing on your sons doing what they really enjoy doing, because that's when they'll sit down and actually do the work and get their best possible results. The best ATAR is 99.95. And Mr. Horan, there's 2,000 increments that, because we've had a bit of a running joke, because I got this, I'm rarely wrong, but I got one thing wrong recently and Mr. Horan was right. I don't like that. 2,000 increments, so obviously 99.95 is the best. 31 students, if the current cohort in Queensland were getting an ATAR, 31 students will get a 99.95 across the state, out of, you know, however many thousands there are. The 31 students will get 99.90. 31 students will get 99.85. You get the idea. It's basically breaking the state up into 2,000 increments from best scores to lowest. You might say, oh, was I the best out of the 31 in the ATAR calculation? You'll never know. You just get categorised as 99.95, 99.9. Can you understand why this is a positive step already, just considering that one fact? Currently, Queensland, the students are broken into 25 categories. In this system, they're broken into 2,000 categories. You can see at least there's some form of scaling to get some clearer sense of result. Now, philosophically, you may completely disagree with all of this. That's fine. I get it. You know, I was putting people in pigeonholes and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, but you're also just dealing with this is what is. So let's figure it out and how to get the best possible results out of it. You know, this particular structure. Right, the major advantages. Really massive advantages, less assessment tasks in Year 11 and 12. What I did a couple of years ago is I taught Year 12 chemistry, sort of. I was in the class teaching, but there was also another teacher with me who did all the hard work, marking and things like that. I needed to do it because I really needed to understand the Queensland system. What I found in teaching the current OP system is I actually didn't have as much time to teach as I wanted. I was mostly assessing. I like teaching. And what you'll find in this new system is teachers will actually have a chance to teach because there's only four tasks and one of them is external. So they really will have that chance to be in there doing what they like doing. And I will point out, as a little tear runs down Mr. Horan's face, if that's actually a tear of joy, no QCS test. The amount of work that goes into QCS preparation and the test itself is outrageous and doesn't actually make any sense. Like if you really sit back and look at it, you know, with a cup of coffee thinking about it, why do students do a QCS test which is really just checking against their results? Like it's a little test to say, well, they get this particular result in the QCS and they're getting these results in their internal tasks, so there's a correlation there. Now that's the worst simplification ever of the QCS, but it's an outrageous amount of work for that. And really, I think everyone's lost their way with it, and that's why we needed to change. Okay. So, this is the... No worries, thanks. Am I over time? Yeah, pretty close. Sorry, I'll move through quickly so you can get to where you need to get to. And the draft ATAR implementation plan. So this is a draft. This is what we're working on. Mr. Horan and his heads of department are working on this solidly. We're going to gather and utilise individual student data to ensure that we can track the boys. We'll probably collect more data through term 4 this year, just to... The ideal in the longer term, we may not get there in 2018, the ideal is to have sort of a bit of a dashboard on your son. He's travelling here and this is what he should be getting, and all of a sudden the needle drops down here and we go, what's happened? And it might be a death in the family, it might be something else, and then we can rectify, we can assist. And that's the idea of data tracking. Now we're going to try to use your sons best we can to set them up so they're tracking their data. The English and maths classes, we're not sure yet what we're going to do with that at this point in time. We may look at an increase, increasing those particular areas in Year 10. We'll have a look at it. It's actually quite complex. It links to the next one, changing 3 elective choices per year to 4 semester-long elective choices next year. That actually connects into the subject. The amount of time that you've got actually in class, if we're going to increase maths and English, it's got to come from somewhere. So this is a pretty long-term picture, but I thought I'd just mention this is what we're looking at. Review the impact of the calendar on class time missed. It's always a big issue. Boys are off everywhere doing all sorts of things and not in class. Now that's important because school's not just about being in class, but we've just got to have a look at that. We're going to change the terminology in 2018 to reflect the new system, review the assessment structures in 2018 to reflect the new system, review our pedagogical methodologies to prepare the boys for 2020, consider exam preparation techniques, and continue with our peer mentoring program. So what's a peer mentoring program? John Hattie did a meta-analysis of the impact on teaching and learning on student results. He took every piece of research that had been done in the world, and this is about 4 or 5 years ago, pieced it all together to say what has the greatest impact on performance in class with students. I won't put it out there to see what you answer, but the number one impact, analysing all of the research from around the world, is you. Parents have the greatest impact on student learning. Second in line is, anyone want to have a go? The teacher. We come second to you, according to the research. But we are second as teachers, and so we need to teach really well. So what we've had going for the last 18 months is a program where teachers are working with teachers. They're in the back of the classes. We have some senior leaders involved in it as well, sitting in the back of the classes, providing feedback to the pedagogical practices that teachers are delivering, to assist them to say, you know, you're always looking at this side of the class, forget this side of the class, or I just timed you and you spoke for 50 minutes. You know, and you didn't give a student a chance to answer, you know, that sort of stuff. Really working with the teachers up to much higher level feedback as well. We'll continue with that. Okay. I'll just finish with my... Sorry, is that a question? That's okay. I'll just finish with my experience. So I went through an education system with an end of year exam that was 80%. So when I did Year 12 in 1983, the chemistry exam examined the entire year, and 80% of the year was one 3-hour exam. And it was overwhelming in a lot of ways, doing that sort of level task as a 17-year-old. The other 20% came from the teachers, quite similar to this sort of structure, but it was fed through to the system. Then I became a teacher and started teaching chemistry, and it changed significantly. It was all over the place. But in Victoria, still, a 3-hour exam, 15-minute reading time plus 3-hour writing time exam is sat at the end of the year, and 66% of the year is assessed in one exam at the end of the year in chemistry in Victoria. And so you understand my drive from the word go as a teacher was to ensure that the course was covered thoroughly, that the course was covered really well. That's the key, to be able to get the boys to understand the course. But there's two other major attachments to it. If you're going to go through an external examination structure, you not only need to understand, if you're going to walk in and try to do an exam, you not only need to understand the course material, you need to be able to read the question and understand what it's asking, and then you need to be able to respond to it. Now, it might seem really obvious stuff, but boys are terrible at times writing down that response. Most of the time they'll interpret it. We need to keep teaching them that problem-solving skill, but a lot of the time they really don't do that well in delivering their responses. Be up here, it's just not there. So we've got to prepare them for that. So that means a change in mindset for teachers. They're not just working towards an internal task that they've set up, as they're doing this year. They're working towards a task that every student around the state will be sitting at exactly the same time at the end of the year. Now, fortunately, it's only 25% for the subjects like English and all of those other subjects, not 80% like I did. Chemistry, though, will be 50%, and that's significant, and it will assess Units 3 and 4. We're going to have to drill the questions, make sure they've done enough trial exams, prepared them so they understand how to do it. It'll change the profile of Year 12 significantly. This is a massive change for the state. I can talk for hours about my experience. I had the biggest question in my life really was in becoming a principal is, can I still teach chemistry? Because I love teaching chemistry. And I really struggle with having to let it go. I love teaching chemistry in the structure that's being proposed for Queensland. I didn't love it as much teaching the OP. And I'm telling you, this is a really good move forward. I think your sons are actually going to have a much better system to work in. My last comment's this. If I've been doing it for 25 years in that sort of structure, then I've finally brought something good to St Brendan's College. This is it. I've got lots of experience in the QCAA or VCE structure, and I know what we're doing, and I know how we're going to do it. Be confident. We'll be okay, and your sons will be okay. How's that? Any questions? St Brennan's College, more than an education, but we're going to focus on education tonight. Yeah, sorry, yeah. Yeah, it's how about I go out on a limb and I just propose a possible structure that I used in Victoria. I'm not saying we will do this. Do you think this is okay, Mr. Horan, that I talk about it, even live streaming? You reckon it's safe? Okay, no worries. Let's go with this structure that I used in Victoria. And I was head of a senior school, so I was in charge of a 10 to 12 school in Victoria, so it was obviously my role to make sure these things were working. Year 11, start of year 11, straight into Unit 1, work your way through the first couple of terms, move into Unit 2, probably somewhere in the crossover between the end of Term 2 and into Term 3, teaching Year 11. Week 5 of Term 4, Year 11 sit exams. Week 6 and 7 of Term 4, Year 11 start Unit 3. It's called pre-start. Now, when I say start, it's not orientation. Don't ever think of the term orientation where you go and you learn and your general stuff. No, I'd walk into the first class, boys, here's chapter 1, off we go. And I'd usually get through about 2 or 3 chapters, maybe 4 at times, chapters of the chemistry course, and you go, well, that's just silly, they'll forget it all over the holidays. Well, they can forget it if I didn't give them all of the questions to do over the Christmas holidays and test them on their first day back of Year 12. And then, obviously, what we've now just done is we've started Unit 3 in Year 11, and so we finish it at a particular point in time in Term 2 to ensure that you can get Unit 4 completed. What you'll find is that I'll drive towards ensuring as much as possible that the courses are completed by the end of Term 3. The teachers will work towards completing as much of it as they can by the end of Term 3, because we need to move into SWAT-VAC. We need to move into that intense period of trial exams, preparing for the exam period at that stage. So it's a little sample. It's a great question. A little sample of, the sort of thing that you can do to ensure that you get your timing right. None of this is signed off at this point in time. I need to keep looking at different variables. The internal assessments and their timing may have an impact, so I've got to have a little bit more of a look at that. Any other questions? Yeah, what I'd do is I'd say to the boys, and I probably shouldn't mention some of these here. What can I say? I'd do some trial exams at different times, just different times, we'll just say. And if I did a trial exam that I would mark for them, they had to be present, first of all, if I was going to mark it as a proper paper, and I'd use past exams. So literally the ones that students had done in previous years, using the same course material. If it was one that I give to them, I'd use the commercial products. So there'll be about, I don't know, in Victoria there's got to be 15 companies that produce trial exams. I used to actually produce one myself and make a bit of cash out of it. Should I have mentioned that on live streaming? There's a plethora of opportunities. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Your sons are the first if you're if they're in Year 9. There won't be any past exams. There'll be trial exams. The QCAA will produce trials, but there won't be 10 years of past exams. My experience, in 25 years, I saw it's taken 40 years for this to change. It changed 4 times in my 25 years of teaching in Victoria. And I'm not saying it's better. It wasn't better. It just kept changing. And each time it changed, I found that the QCAA, for example, would actually be reasonably lenient on the first group. Now, I can't promise that, obviously, but it was just like the questions weren't as hard or as rigorous as future years. And I've got no say on that. Sorry, QCAA, please don't be watching this. But I just think that's my experience from Victoria. So I think there's going to be some advantages and disadvantages attached to it. I'm going to just say to you again, I get this structure. I think, I've lived it for such a long time. There's some great advantages to it, and I think it's really exciting. Any other questions? Sorry I've gone over time. I should have kept an eye on the phone. All right, if you do have any other questions, I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here for a little while, and I can answer those. Thanks to anyone who was live streaming today. I'll be interested in any of your feedback attached to the live streaming event, being the first official live streaming event for St Brennan's. It's we did actually sneak a little live stream of our assembly the other day, but that was a trial. I'll be interested in any feedback from yourselves as well, if you can forward that to the college. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.